Welcome to the Tourney podcast. We're back again. Hopefully, everybody's going to tune in. This is a very important interview I'm going to do today with a shipmate of mine, Larry Bowen. Welcome, Larry. And, first of all, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Where did you grow up with your family, and where did you go to school?
Okay, I grew up in Waterloo, New York. I was actually born in Clifton Springs, New York, in May 23rd, 1946. And but all my school years were in Waterloo. Elementary school was Scoyace Elementary School. Then I went over to Waterloo Central Schools, and finally Waterloo Senior High. So my first 18 years were all pretty much in Waterloo, New York.
I see. Did you go to any schools like Sea Cadets or ROTC or anything like that?
No, I didn't. I was very active in the Boy Scouts, made Eagle Scout, and had a paper route that I worked for the Geneva Times, and I was just too busy with other things to get involved in any kind of ROTC or anything else. But I probably wasn't that interested in it.
No, I get that. I get that. Okay, let's start with why did you join the Navy, and what schools did you go to?
I graduated in 1964 and was working for an electrical company in Seneca Falls, New York, called Sylvania Electric. And in the spring of that 1965, I received my draft notice for the Army. And, I went to the Navy recruiter and said, hey, if I have a choice, I'd like to join the Navy. He says, yeah, go take your Army physical. And if you pass, we'll put you in the Navy. So I went up, I took my Army physical, and of course I passed. And then I went back and saw the Navy recruiter, and he says, well, you probably ought to go in by the end of the month, or else the Army might call you. So I said, okay, I'll join the Navy, and I went to boot camp out at Great Lakes Naval Station.
How long did you stay in boot camp? How many weeks?
It was either 11 or 12 weeks. I know I was in there in March of 1965, and it was really cold. I know why they call it the Windy City, but I think I got out of there in late May or early June.
Okay, Larry, now, when you got out of boot camp, what was your ambition, or where did they send you to, or what A schools did you go to?
Well, they made me a temporary petty officer second class when I was in boot camp. I was a squad leader, and when I went for my assignment, I wanted to be a radioman, and I wanted to work on radios and be a radioman. When I got to the selection board there, they said, well, your scores were pretty high. Why don't you go down to the end of the hall and talk to these communications technicians? He says, they've got radioman skills as well. So I went down to the end of the hall and sat down and talked with them, and it sounded like it was a pretty good deal. I was going to go to A school in Pensacola, Florida. That was a 6-month school. So I did that. I signed up for the CT school, and as a communications technician radioman. Little did I know I wasn't going to be working on radios. I was going to be using them to copy code. So I still wanted to work with it because I knew what the mission was, and I was really excited about being able to help, our Defense Department with some of the activities that we were involved in.
Did you, when you got aboard your first duty station, wherever it was at, did you go to the Liberty first, or where'd you go?
Now, my first duty station was Bremerhaven, Germany. And it was, I thought it was going to be a 2-year tour. I got over there and, showed my proficiency at copying Morse code. And so when I proved that I could copy Morse code, they sent me orders to the USS Liberty. So I was only in Bremerhaven about 4 months, and went to the Liberty in Norfolk, Virginia. I think it was in March, might have been April of 1966.
1966. Okay. When you first got aboard Liberty, what were your thoughts? I mean, what did you think about that ship and what it looked like?
Well, it looked brand new. I mean, I hadn't been on a Navy ship before, but it was, spotless. And I was excited about going out to sea. Wasn't sure what I was going to encounter, but I definitely liked the idea of going to sea. My older brother spent 4 years in the Navy and never saw a ship, so this was exciting for me. And I was duly impressed with the group that I was being assigned to, which was the Naval Security Group on board with Commander Lewis as our.
Explain to me and to others that are going to watch this your job and what kind of classification did you have from a scale to 1 to 3 on the top secret list?
Well, I had a top secret clearance with special accesses. So what that meant was that, if you and I were working in the same center, I might be doing something that you wouldn't have access to. It was all based on a need to know. So, several people in our area had special accesses, people that worked in different skill sets, like we had communications technician, radioman, which is what I was, but we had communications technicians technical, and those T branchers worked a different type of communications. So what they did and what they knew was totally different than what I was trained in. And that's the way the Navy liked it. And of course, we all worked really for the National Security Agency. They provided us with tasking. And so even though I was in the Navy, the National Security Agency provided all of us on board with a list of things that we were supposed to do when we were out to sea.
Well, for a person, it's a top secret clearance, and there were approximately 200 of you guys, and I do believe, if I remember correctly, what I've been told, everybody had their own degree of secrecy, but you never knew what each other person was doing. Is that correct?
That's correct. They could be working in the same room, but they'd be working in a different position. Whatever they were doing over there was their business, and what I was doing in my area was my business. We didn't share a lot of stories or information about what was going on in the different areas.
Absolutely, it was hush hush between fellow CTs to talk about your jobs or what you were doing or what you were copying or whatever, because you all had a certain mission and all of them weren't the same. So just like I was in engineering, as things were, it was a different ship, two different crews. And what was that like for you?
It was different. I mean, the CTs had their own little group that hung out together, but I was pretty social, so I managed to get with the ship service company, and I played pinochle with them, and we played cards, and we watched movies together in the evening, and it was, I couldn't tell them what I was doing, and we didn't really discuss what each other was doing. So but it was unfortunate because some of the members of so for me,
Well,
I didn't get involved in that part of it. If anybody asked me, I'd tell them, no, we don't have pool tables, or we didn't have, a bowling alley. But I wouldn't tell them what we did have. I just said, no, that's BS. Aside from that, wasn't much else that was different. Like ship service people had their own responsibilities, and they did an excellent job of taking care of that. And we had our own responsibilities when we were on watch, and we took care of that. When we got off watch, we had 32 hours off. We were standing what was called a 111 and 32 shift. So 8 hours on, 8 hours off, 8 hours on, 8 hours off, 8 hours on, and then 32 hours off. But during that off time, we became part of ship's company in that we, helped with the the salt water wash down of the ship, the passing out of laundry that was presented to us, and just general cleanup duties. Plus, we also had to go down in our comm spaces or communication spaces and relieve the watch for their chow breaks. So it wasn't really a 32-hour break, except that we weren't, physically sitting a posit the whole time. We only had to sit the posit position when we were doing a relief for a chow break.
Okay, Larry, when you weren't working or you had certain things that you wanted to do in private time, read or go up on deck, take me through a day of that.
Well, like I said earlier, we have duties that we still did. Like I had to go out and scrub decks. I also had a relieving the watch for chow breaks, and my personal time was writing letters back to my then girlfriend. That was about it. I mean, I wrote a letter home every day, and it paid off. She waited for me, so that was a good thing. And I don't know. That's really about it. I didn't do a lot of reading. We had to study for our advancements, so we took advancement courses to get ready for the upcoming tests. I passed my third class test on board the ship, and I passed my second class test on board the ship, and it was all due to the fact that I was able to go down. We had a training room down in our operations spaces, and I could go down there and study, read books, and get the material that I needed to prepare for the upcoming service.
How many different people got into the CT part of the Navy? Because during Vietnam and World War II and stuff like that, communications technicians were dying off like flies. And that's one of the reasons I just wondered why you went into that field.
Well, the real reason was the mission, the importance of the mission. I mean, we had to be trustworthy. We had to be clean, no drugs or anything like that. And we were just, drilled that, the job that we had was so important that we shouldn't take it for granted. We should do our best. And I think everybody did that. And the relatively rapid advancement was due to the fact that we had access to technical materials to help us qualify for the next rating.
All right, Larry, take us to our last cruise from Norfolk to Abidjan, please.
Okay. Well, I think it was about a 8 or 9 day trip from Norfolk to Abidjan. We got there on the 23rd of May, I believe. It was my birthday. And I actually had an OOD watch. So I during the cruise over, we did our normal activities. We probably had a general quarters drill. We got the ship in ship shape, keeping it clean. Every day you'd have, cleaning duties. And so if you were off, you ended up getting stuck with the cleaning duties. But the trip itself, I think, was relatively smooth. I didn't get seasick, so we didn't encounter any storms. We did on one of our cruises. We had a hurricane or something out there, and everybody on board, I think, got sick. But it wasn't the first cruise. First cruise, I was a polywog, and for those people that don't know what polywogs were, we were seamen who hadn't made it across the equator yet, had been initiated. I think I was looking forward to it, just to say that I'd done it, and then I'd become a shellback. Once I actually went through the initiation process, I really wanted to be a shellback so that I get to take it out on the next group of shipmates that came on board. Anybody that was on that first cruise who was a polywog did in fact go across the equator and got initiated. The XO was a polywog that year, and he helped organize the polywog rebellion the night before the day we were going to cross. And he had keys to all the all the lockers and everything. So he had access to where the showbacks were storing a lot of their equipment. And he got us into there, and we were able to throw a lot of that stuff over the side. But the next morning, the chow hall made up another batch of garbage for us, and they had everything they needed to do their initiation, and it was well done.
Okay, that experience was a good experience, and I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to get the next ones. But we get into Abidjan. Did you expect anything different than any normal cruise?
Well, it's an African port, and I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't a big drinker, so I don't even know if I went ashore. I don't know that we were in there long enough for us to go to shore. The night of the 23rd, we actually received our orders to go up into the Med, and anybody that was on shore got called back immediately. I think we probably sent some of the shipmates out to get guys and get them to return to the ship, because I think it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning by the time we were all back on board, and the captain was able to get the ship underway. So it was that first cruise was kind of uneventful as far as a shore excursion. I did on my second cruise, I actually was a showback. I got to initiate members of the crew, and I think it was Leopoldville that I actually got ashore. Was a little surprised to see military people on jeeps driving around in the city with guns. That didn't make me feel real comfortable, but I did get a meal and something to drink while I was on shore, and then I went back to the ship. And then I think it was the third cruise that I was on was our last cruise, and that was in May of '67 when we left Norfolk and headed over to the west coast of of Africa again. So that trip to Abidjan, again, was pretty much uneventful. No special surprises or anything until we got to Abidjan, and we got that message to report up to the Mediterranean with no delays.
We ended up in Rota, Spain, where we picked up some linguists, and they worked with you in your department, not your specific department, but they were spooks, spies. 3 Marines. The only one survived there is, of course, Bryce Lockwood, and Alan Blue. He was a civilian NSA, CIA type guy. And I don't know if there was any more or not, Larry, but what did you guys think when you heard we were going into a war zone after they got aboard?
Well, we were, first off, the rumor around was that the Marines were there to, protect us. They were going to provide guard duty, I guess, on the front of the operations door. And you're right, there were 3 linguists, and Alan Blue was also a linguist. He was from the CIA person was a guy named Robert Wilson, and he came on board as a 3rd-class petty officer, but he was definitely CIA. We didn't know it at the time, but after the fact, we found out that he was CIA, and he was there for special purposes. But again, like with us, our mission was classified, and his mission was classified. So I don't know what role he actually played when we were out to sea. I don't know if he was just sending messages back to the CIA based on information that we had. But as far as what I thought going into a war zone was, well, we had the 6th Fleet there, and the 6th Fleet, would probably be there with us, which would be unusual because we always traveled alone, as you remember. Never had any escorts or anything like that. But going into the Eastern Mediterranean, I didn't know exactly what was going on over there. I found out afterwards that the Arab-Israeli war, 6-day war had started. This is after we had left Rota, Spain, and we're already in transit to the Eastern Med. What we didn't know was that apparently Israel had sent a message to, I don't know if it was the 6th Fleet or Department of Defense or who, but, they demanded that all ships stay a minimum of 100 nautical miles off the coast because it was a war zone. That message never got to the USS Liberty. And so, we continued our transit knowing that our operating area in most cases would be just over the horizon or 13 nautical miles off the coast.
Well, Larry, what are the odds of the most sophisticated spy ship in the world not picking up a message, do not go, get 100 miles away from there? That sounds like to me we were the only ones that didn't get that message for a reason.
Yeah, the odds are phenomenal. I mean, there were multiple lines of communication between us and the United States. NSA had a direct line to us, Pentagon had a direct line to us, and it was next to impossible for us to not get the message. Plus, the Sixth Fleet had assumed, communications oversight for us when we entered the Med because we came under their protocols. So, yeah, for us as communication specialists, to not be able to get a message of that importance was just unbelievable. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, that was the reason that we ended up being attacked, I guess, was that we just never got the word to stay 100 nautical miles off the coast. And on June 8th, we were, doing our normal operations off the Sinai Peninsula.
Well, maybe there's a reason, and I believed this for a long time, Larry. And I think you probably, as well as many other shipmates, there's a reason we were there. We were put there for a reason. Things don't just happen because by happenstance. They happen for a reason. So I'll always believe that we were there for a certain reason, and we'll get into that more. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I knew what the cover story was. I knew that we were told that the reason we were over there was to help with the communications for the embassy folks in Israel and to provide a platform for them to come to if they ever had to evacuate. So that was the cover story. But in reality, those of us that had a mission were there to copy whatever we could to shed any light on what was going on in the war. Commander Lewis said we didn't have a mission to copy what Israel was saying, but when you're copying Morse code, if it's encoded, you don't know who's sending it and who's not. We didn't have any kind of tasking to copy any particular entity. So what we did was we searched until we found, unusual traffic, and then we started copying it. So, everybody had the same basic mission, was to try and pick up and copy anything of importance. And that's what we did when we got on station.
Well, we weren't, as far as I understand from the guys that were in the compartment, the secret compartment, you guys weren't supposed to be spying on Israel or British Commonwealth. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, when we go out on a mission, typically we know what it is we're looking for or who it is we're looking for, and we're given some guidance from the National Security Agency as to, where we might find whatever the entity is that we're looking for. In this case, we'd never been to the Eastern Med before. We didn't really know what exactly we might encounter. We did know that there was going to be potential Russian communications. And so, the linguists that came on board were all skilled in Russian language. For us, with an international Morse code, the language itself is fundamentally the same, but they had, I'm going to say, a half a dozen characters in their alphabet that were different. And we, as manual Morse operators, had to learn those 6 characters because we ended up having to make 2 keystrokes. It might be, a letter and something like an ampersand sign or a comma. It depended on what the letter was, but the Morse code was, how we learned it. And for me, that made a lot of sense as far as, what I might see And little did I know that the Israelis also used unusual or different characters. And so the morning of the 8th, when I had the watch, the first couple of hours of my watch, when I'm on duty at 7 o'clock, and probably around 9:30, I picked up a signal that was unusual, sending unusual traffic. And of course, it got sent over to our processing and reporting office, which was just across the passageway. And then they came back over and said that they wanted me to stay on it because it was very, very hot. And so I continued to copy it, and they continued to take copies of my traffic and go over and analyze it, and in theory, report back to headquarters what was being said. So it was, for me, that part of the day became pretty exciting. I went to chow with my buddy Bob Eisenberg at about 11:30 a.m. And on the way over there, Bob says that it was what I was copying was very important, and that somebody was going to get it that day. They talked about a target, but they never identified who or what the target was. But apparently, through the communications, they were able to determine that the target was going to be hit by multiple assets. I didn't know that at the time. We couldn't talk about it outside of the spaces. So we ate our chow and went back to work, and I didn't hear any more about it other than the fact that it was still active communications when I got back from lunch.
Yeah, Larry, the thing that really intrigues me is with you guys, what you were doing, you had the apprehension when you heard that from Eisenberg, and I know he was a friend of yours. He was a Jewish guy too, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he spoke 4 different languages. So, he was a Russian linguist, but he also spoke Hebrew, French, and of course English. So he was a good friend of mine, very good friend. We when we were in port and back in Norfolk, I would take Bob up to New York on our weekend breaks or whatever, and just so he had a family that he would be close to. His family was out in Minnesota.
Okay, let's go a little bit further. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the attack started. Now we all know that we were overflown by marked Israeli aircraft on the 7th and the 8th with their wings flapping around and waving at us, and we waved at the pilots. Very visible. They were Israeli. They had Israeli markings. Flying boxcar, DC-3, and other smaller planes, as I've said it on a lot of different shows. But the mood aboard the ship, because we were denied escorts by Washington when McGonigal asked for it, and also your boss, Dave Lewis, requested an escort, and he was denied. So we were left out there alone, but I didn't feel any heat or any worry about Israel. Did you?
No, not at all. I mean, I in my case, I was rooting for Israel to do whatever they needed to do and get the war over with. They the thing that they didn't want was they didn't want us telling the world, what really happened there. They were claiming that Egypt was the one that started the offensive maneuvers, and so it was a provoked attack. Of course, Israel went in on the first day of that Arab-Israeli war and wiped out the entire Egyptian Air Force. And of course, we knew that Egypt hadn't started that. That was all Israel's initiative. So they didn't want the world to know that. But I think it eventually came out that that they were the ones that initiated the hostilities.
Yeah, they sure did. And here we're right in the middle of it. We get there on station on the 7th and the 8th, and when the attack started. Tell me what you guys were doing, what you were thinking down there. Now remember, what you were two decks below the waterline.
Yes,
2 decks below the waterline. So
that's correct.
Go ahead and give us a synopsis of that, please.
Okay. Well, that was our operations area. I was in Radio Research 1, which was our positions were all set up for, copy and code. And so on that morning, I talked about comms that I had. That afternoon, as far as I knew, right after the general quarters drill, the drill that we had, everything should have returned to normal. The skipper called a general quarters at about, I don't know, 12:30, I think. And it lasted for about an hour. And then we secured from that. People who were on break went up and were sunbathing. Of course, I'm internal to the ship, so I didn't see anything that was going on outside. I do recall the overflights earlier in the day because Tom Raleigh, our photographer, was called to the bridge several times to take photos of the aircraft when they were coming over. And I think when I say several times, I think it was close to a half a dozen times that he was called up to the bridge to take photographs. But again, from my position, I didn't see or hear anything that made me feel uneasy. I thought, well, we're just doing our job, so I couldn't understand at the time why so many overflights, because we thought Israel was our friend, and the aircraft that were overflying had Israeli markings, so it wasn't like they were trying to hide anything. Of course, after the fact, we know that they were just doing reconnaissance to secure all of their targets that they wanted to hit when they did their strafing runs.
How many antennas were on that ship? I really don't know how many, but there was a lot.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact number. I know we had the big dish called Treshcom, and that was suitable for us to bounce communications off the moon back to headquarters in Washington. And of course, we had specific antennas for specific types of targets that you're searching for. So if you're looking for submarines, that's one group of frequencies and one group of antennas. If you're looking for radio communications, that was normally in a high frequency range, and that was the area that I was searching, and other CTR branches were searching for coverage. And then I don't know about the T-birds. I mean, I don't know if the communications technicians technical were working in a different frequency range, but they would have had specific antennas for their type of activity as well. So, yeah, there were a lot of antennas, and they were all specific for certain missions.
Okay, Larry, and you left off with what?
I left off with the fact that the antennas that we had on board were all specific for different types of communications.
Okay.
Each group's mission had a certain set of frequencies that they would be covering, and we'd have a certain set of antennas that were specifically geared for those particular transmissions.
All right. Now, the Israeli attacking aircraft were unmarked. They were Mystere and Mirage jets, approximately 30 sorties over the ship. I know that they took out every tuning antenna on that ship within the first pass, first 3-4 seconds, with all 450 caliber machine guns gone. And there was one tuning antenna that Terry Haldebardier took offline and ran a coaxial cable to it. But how did they hit all those antennas so accurately? They were using heat-seeking missiles because those antennas were tuning. Is that correct?
Yeah. They when the antenna is active, it sends off heat because of its being online, and all of the antennas that were up and active at that time were targeted, like you said, by the aircraft on their first pass. The one antenna that didn't get targeted because it wasn't sending off any heat was the one antenna that Terry Haldebardier, was able to ultimately run a coax cable up to it and get it hooked up so that we could get out, our SOS. Because up to that time, we had no way to communicate. We couldn't tell anybody what was going on until that other antenna came online.
Yeah, I understand that totally. And you know this probably better than I do. When the attacking aircraft came in, they were jamming all of our signals, including, SOS and whatever else we had. How did they get those frequencies?
Well, they were our ally. International distress signals have international frequencies allocated for transmitting distress and, calls for help. So they're published. They would have been, well aware of those. What they might not have had is they might not have had our transmitting frequencies that we were sending information back to Washington on and so on. But by taking out the antennas, we had no way of sending anything out. So there was, we were blind to what was going on outside. And like you say, they were jamming everything. So the radiomen couldn't get out on, any kind of platform to get the message out.
When we finally did get the message out, Rockstar, under attack by unknown jet aircraft. Please come help us. Rockstar, we need you basically. And, that message went out to the Sixth Fleet, and as far away as Vietnam, Captain Tully sent aircraft to come help us. They were called by McNamara, and then we get another volley coming from the America and the Saratoga again, called back by Johnson. So they just left us out there alone. But the attack was still going on. For probably another 15, 20 minutes, or at least 15 minutes, the air attack, when we already got a message out and they didn't come help us. So we didn't know that then, but we surely knew it then. When that was over, here come the torpedo boats with 5 torpedoes shooting at us. And this continued for another hour and a half. So take us through your thoughts there. What did you hear? Did you hear a lot of explosions at all, or was it kind of mute, or what?
Well, the initial attack, when at about the time the skipper was, coming over the 1MC, or internal communications, saying, general quarters, this is not a drill. When I heard the strafing run, it sounded like someone just dragging an anchor chain or something, rapidly across the deck. I mean, it just, there wasn't any other way I could describe it. It was just loud, rather pinging on the deck. And, but we didn't see anything. All we did was hear that. And it was just like when the captain came over the 1MC again to say, prepare for torpedo attack. You mentioned that they launched 5 torpedoes at us, and fortunately only the one hit, but it hit right in our comm spaces. It entered on the starboard side in our communications center, and it wiped out the communications center, our maintenance shop, the Radio Research 1 that I was in earlier in the day, and our processing and reporting shop. It just obliterated most everything down in, that second level or third level when the torpedo came in and exploded instead of imploded. So they, and for me, that was deafening. I mean, it was a real loud, concussion type blow to the ship and to my hearing. I mean, for me, it was just ear popping. And of course, I was thrown to the overhead, got a slight concussion from that, came back down on the deck, and then Clyde Way and I, who were both in our general quarters station at the time, managed to get out of the room and get outside to help with getting the hatch open so that we could get our shipmates out from down in the becoming the flooded compartment.
Larry, I thought about this over and over and over again about the people in the engine room, George Golden, my boss, and Brooksy, and all you guys down there in the torpedo spaces where it hit. And you guys stayed at your duty station like the brave men you are, when you could have just run the hell out of there. And maybe they should have tried to get you all out of there. But I consider all you guys that did that are my heroes for, I mean, it takes a lot of guts to do that when imminent death. You're real close to it. So
yeah, being 2 decks below the water line, when that torpedo hit, those fellows that were down in Radio Research 1, the comm spaces, the P&R spaces, the maintenance shop, they didn't stand a chance. I mean, we probably had 25 or 30 sailors ultimately saved from those compartments, but we lost 25 guys. It's it's only through God's hand that saved us. I mean, he kept us afloat. He kept those of us that were walking wounded, alive, so that we could help with the shipmates that were worse off than we were. I don't know. It was just, looking back on it, it was a scary ordeal for everybody. But we did, like you say, stayed on our station. We were all responsible for certain duties under a general quarters drill, which is why I wasn't in the flooded compartment. I was one deck above the flooded compartment, still doing my job. But after the torpedo hit, like I said, Clyde and I got out of the room that we were in and went out to help Lieutenant Bennett and Lieutenant Johnson undog the hatch so that we could get people out of there. First, they just opened up the scuttle, but the scuttle was too small. It's just a little round hole in the hatch, and we couldn't get people out of there fast enough. So we ended up getting the hatch itself undogged and opened up. And then I was sent over to the main entrance to hand out life jackets to everybody that was coming out. So, there's another opportunity for me to just boat and not do anything. But I was handing out life jackets to everybody that was coming out of the flooded compartments, and didn't think twice about, just pulling out a life jacket and taking it off. I guess, that was part of our training. You just, you do what you're, told to do, and, things will work out for, the way they're supposed to.
They certainly worked out for the crew of the USS Liberty doing our duty. But, in the meantime, when these torpedo boats had already torpedoed our ship, they continued to fire on us and go around and around the ship, firing cannons and machine guns at us, shooting at our stretcher bearers, anything that moved. And, when the old man said, prepare to abandon ship, there was only 3 life rafts left, as you know. The rest of them were destroyed by fire or bombs or whatever, machine guns. But we only had 3 left, and when the old man said prepare to abandon ship, we were going to put our most severely wounded in them, and there was a lot of them, as you know, on the mess decks. But the saddest part of it, really, you think about cruelty and what they did to us, and then to shoot up our life rafts, take one aboard their boat as a trophy of the kill. We didn't have a chance, man. They wanted us all dead, and that was pretty evident. And as you said, by the grace of God, only by the grace of God, he saved the people he could. And unfortunately, 34 of our brothers paid the heavy price, the real heavy price. But, the attack stopped. Finally, they sent some troop-carrying helicopters over, and they left too. I wasn't real happy with any of them, but they took off, and it was over. The triage went on all night, operation after operation, and that was a long night. Our own government didn't even send a Piper Cub or anything to come see how we were for 17 hours with a 40 by 40 foot torpedo hole in this ship. We're listing badly to the starboard side, and we got no help. We got no help during the attack or after the attack. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was very disgusted with the fact that, no one came to our aid. We were told when we came into the med that they would be within 15 minutes of, air support for us, which is why, part of the reason that they denied us to have an escort. But my thoughts were that, our government abandoned us in a time of need. We were out there, we were still under attack, and the aircraft that were sent from the Saratoga and the aircraft that were sent from the America were both called back. Like you said, McNamara called back the first wave, and he tried to call back the second wave when Admiral Geiss got on the line and said he wanted it from higher authority, and that's when Johnson got on the line, said, I don't care if the crew and the entire ship goes to the bottom of the med. I'm not going to embarrass an ally. What's bothered me all these years is that how did Johnson know who was doing the attacking when we didn't know until the torpedo boats came up alongside, and we actually saw the Star of David on the shaft. So, we weren't able to communicate that to anybody. So it's bothered me for 58 years that, Johnson knew about, who was doing the attacking. The only way he could have known, in my mind, was if he had been corroborating with Israel over what was going on over there. I, over the years, have felt that we were set up. I mean, we were sent over there for a mission, but with the understanding that we were expendable. And Johnson and his administration weren't going to do anything to help us if we came under attack, as was the case.
The cover-up is still going on today is probably the most shameful cover-ups in American history. When your own government sets you up to be murdered by a foreign government, blame it on Egypt, and get us into World War III on the side of Israel. And, that was nothing but a land grab then when they went to Sinai. But us going down, 294 American sailors and Marines killed or sunk by Nasser, Egypt, our country would be begging for blood, and they'd have got a lot of it. But that wasn't to happen.
Well, I mean, the Strategic Air Command had their bombers, armed and ready. They were in a standby position to come and attack Egypt if, in fact, we ever sank. They got called off only after Israel apologized and said it was an accident, a mistaken identity. And it was absolutely no mistake. The overflights proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that they knew exactly who they were, attacking and what they were going to attack, what they were going to use to attack. And, they just carried out a well-planned out mission that, fortunately for us, wasn't successful.
No, it wasn't, but you can imagine the thought in the minds of the pilots and the torpedo crews. They couldn't sink a old World War II Victory Hull ship. I mean, they still got to be scratching their heads. But, let's move on to, the cover-up, Larry.
Okay.
And I've already told a lot of people about my situation. I was told to shut up, and many others on the way back going to Malta. But what was your experience?
I was on the 01 level aft when I think it was Admiral Kidd who came on board. And he was talking to us as a group, told us, that he was, glad that we were alive. But then he also told us that we were to never talk about the what he was calling the incident, and if we did, we'd be subject to fines or imprisonment or both. And I was a second-class petty officer at the time. I was scared to death. I had already survived one attack here. Now I'm being challenged by an admiral to never talk about it, and it was I took it to heart. I mean, I never talked about it to anyone for 50 years. I didn't start talking about what happened back then until I was talking with Ron Kukl, and that was in 2016. So I don't know. The cover up started almost immediately. With admirals coming on board and telling us, never to talk about it. We weren't to talk to the press. We weren't to talk to our families. No one. Newspapers back in the States were, told to shut it down. After a couple of days, the news of the USS Liberty and the attack started going from like the front page to the middle of the paper to the back of the paper. And I don't think within 2 weeks of the attack that there was any more discussion about what happened. And of course, as well as I do that that's been carrying on now for 58 years, where we can't get a congressional investigation. We can't get any sitting president to open up the case. It's, we're still being abandoned by our own government. And that bothers me a lot. That, I love our country and I'd serve again if asked. I don't know. I'd like to think that, the lessons that they learned from the attack on us was, they've got to be more proactive.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we penned a letter together and you sent it out to President Trump, not once, but twice. Have you ever heard anything from it yet?
The only thing we got back, Phil, was the little green card that you fill out, because we sent out a certified, registered mail. And so I got a little green card back signed by someone, which told me that it made it all the way to the White House. But after that, I don't know who read it. It's still appropriate. I mean, I sent it out again not too long ago, just changed the dates. And, I haven't heard anything back on that. I updated the dates, and if there's anything else that needed to be changed, I did and sent it back out. So there's a new president, and I was hoping that, maybe he'd do something that none of the others had guts to do.
Well, none of them's had the guts. LBJ set us up, and every president since then to Donald Trump has ignored us. But that's been the norm for all of us. Congress ignores us, the Senate ignores us, the cabinet ignores us. Everybody ignores the USS Liberty survivors. But I want to go back. Okay, we get into Malta. I want to go to Malta, and we drive there, and this is where. I know this is a hard story for you to relive, but nobody can tell it like you do as a survivor, and exactly what you guys had to do. Now, the CTs were the only ones allowed down there because they had the top secret clearance. They didn't want the crew like me. I didn't have a clearance or anything like that. They wanted their own guys to do it. After the attack, they have to go down and recover their broken body, blown up shipmates, and you can take it from there, please, Larry.
Okay. Yeah, we pulled into Malton, the dry dock, and the local service people couldn't come into our spaces. Our own shipmates, ship service personnel couldn't come into our spaces. It had to be us communications technicians that had the clearances, because we had to not only clean up and recover the 25 sailors and Marines that died that day, but also we had to remove all of the classified materials before anyone from the local, repair crew could come on board. For me, I was working with Ron Kukl, and actually went into the spaces as part of the first recovery team. The first body we recovered was a Marine who was suspended from the overhead. Apparently, he was trying to get out of the hatch, and we must have, listed to the port side and came back, and when the water rushed out from the starboard side, it caught him, and it caught him right underneath the throat. So we were able to, remove him from the overhead, put him in a body bag, and send him up, one level to the, one level to, not the old one level or, outside, but internal to get him back to wherever we were storing the bodies at that time. I don't remember who the second person was that we recovered, but again, it was pretty much a body that was intact. We again had to put them in a body bag and send them up one deck to get them removed from the flooded compartment. Now, it wasn't flooded because we'd been in dry dock. The third body that I recovered was my buddy Bob Eisenberg. And it was, when I recovered his body, the first thing I saw was a shrapnel wound to the chest. And so it told me that he died instantly and didn't suffer. And we got his body out, and then I had to come out of the spaces because it was just too gruesome, too emotional to continue in there. We had other members of the crew that were willing and able and standing ready to come in and continue with the body recovery. But for the next 2 weeks, we had to clean up our spaces and get everything ship shape. We were recovering body parts from every area in that compartment. Like you said, fingers, hands, arms, just every little fragment of flesh that we found, we had to take over to Ron Kukl to have him identified. If we could identify it for him because it was close to a body, or it was, in an area where only certain individuals worked, then we would tell him that. that would help him, put the parts in the right location with the right body. Ron said he doesn't remember doing any of that, even though he did. I mean, he was responsible for it. And, we helped wherever we could. But like I said, for 2 weeks, our job was to go in there, clean up all of the classified materials that were laying around and had been soaked with salt water and oil. It was just probably the most gruesome task I've ever been associated with. I still have nightmares from, I'm sure all the guys that participated in those recovery operations had the same feelings. We were all diagnosed, I think, with PTSD. I know I was. And post-traumatic stress disorder is, something that we didn't have back in the early 60s. I think that term came out back in the 80s or 90s, but before that they were calling war, something that had to do with gunfire, and it was just shock. It's a shock to the system. So we've been living with that for the past 58 years, and hopefully in our lifetime we'll get some more satisfaction by having our government open up an investigation and try and get some of the answers out. We've got a lot of faith in Trump trying to, uncover secrets that have been stored away for years and years. And, this is certainly a secret that's been kept in the deepest, confines of our government for that many years. So, if he's reading our letters, he'll do something about it, I hope.
I guess we can always hope, but you never know. But you were talking. I think the word or several words you were looking for was shell shock. That's what,
shell shock.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's what they called it during World War II and others. But yeah, it's just Trump said he's going to release all of them. Martin Luther King Jr. and JFK and Epstein. So he's got a lot of things he's got to open up, and I would hope he would. But with our Congress, Larry, and you know this very well, 2/3 of them are taking money from AIPAC.
Right.
And, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tom Massey from Kentucky. And there's a few more that want to be, in the center and just tell the truth. So I think that's a good thing. And we need the truth. But, with testimony like you and Mickey and others to follow, we're not letting down our shipmates. We're carrying on their lives because we're the only one that can speak for them.
Right. In fact, I know some of the crew members have documented their activities during the attack and after. And I just recently put together a 6-page document called my testimonial that I'm going to get notarized and then, present it to, I don't know, you, or I'm not sure who's taking them and putting them, online somewhere. But I definitely want to get it recorded so that in the event of my passing, I'll at least have words on paper that tell my side of the story.
Yes, I'm going to do the same thing. I haven't started mine yet. I better do it before I kick the bucket. The truth is overcoming a lot of things, and social media, like I've been on for quite some time, and that's why I do this podcast. Is I want people to understand that we're not a bunch of people out here that are nuts.
Are you still there?
We don't have really any agenda except to get the truth out and let the world know that this was no mistake, as the IDF says it was, in a 7-day sham investigation by which Ward Boston came out later before he died and said, we knew it was a sham then, and that
it's been working pretty well for the past hour.
Yeah. It's our day in court. We need our day in court. Hey, listen, if they want to make fools of us, get in front of Congress and see if they can.
Dad,
yes.
You cut out for like the last 5 minutes, so let's just start
over
with your
you
thought.
cut out
for like the last 5
On
minutes.
what topic?
Whatever you were talking about the last.
We were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, but the things that has been covered up and the way we've been treated by our entire government and Israel, is it ever going to come out? I sure hope so. I mean, we've been working hard at it. We need to keep on working hard at it. And, we're we're their voices, Larry, and I give you so much credit for you stayed in the Navy and you worked for National Security Agency for how many years?
21 years while I was in the Navy. And then when I got out of the Navy, I became a defense contractor and still supported the National Security Agency for 22 more years.
So, by your oath to keep a secret, and which you did keep a secret for all those years, and that had to eat you up, but you did.
Yeah.
You did.
And it's still, exactly what I did and how I did it are, still secrets. You don't tell certain things about your duty assignments. And as a CT, you needed to keep your clearances. And every 5 years, you get a renewal on your clearance. So if anything happens within that 5-year cycle that was unacceptable, you'd lose your clearance and lose your job. Of course, like I said, I supported the National Security Agency for a total of 43 years. Every year when I had to do my updates, I always passed. It's tough, but that's part of the job, and part of my being able to support my family was by just keeping my mouth shut.
Absolutely. And you did, and you finally break loose, and you got Ron Kukul and then, of course, me and others, and we did that deal in Florida for sacrificing liberty. But, you had a great career, a very untarnished career. You retired from as 01 to Chief Petty Officer, what was it?
Chief Warrant Officer 3.
Okay, CW3. So
Yep.
that's quite an accomplishment, quite an accomplishment. And I'll tell you, I'm very proud of you for that, Larry. And we're going to close it up here. But is there any last thoughts you want to say to anybody, or that you want to do now?
Well, I want to thank you for having the podcast. I mean, this is our way of keeping the story alive, keeping the truth coming out to the American public. And depending on how many people listen to the podcast, just know that Israel isn't the ally that we've all been programmed to believe. They're not a strong ally as far as I'm concerned. And that's through my knowledge of what they've done in the past. They've had spies within our organization. John Pollard comes to mind. He was caught spying for Israel. And so, what they did to us on June 8th, 1967 is just another indication of why you can't trust them. They're interested in obtaining additional land over in the Gaza, and I think they're going to do whatever they can to benefit themselves. And unfortunately, our administration and the government is willing to let them continue to do that. There hasn't been any indication that we're not going to support them in whatever their activities are in the Middle East. We used to think they were the strongest ally we had in the Middle East, but in fact, a lot of the information that they've passed on to us has been suspect at best. So my thought is that if the people can talk to their local congressmen and senators and try to get them to open up an investigation into the attack on the USS Liberty, do so. If you haven't already looked at the 4-part docuseries called Sacrificing Liberty, I would strongly recommend that to any interested party. You can get that by just going up online and typing in Sacrificing Liberty, and it'll bring you right to the 4-part docuseries that Phil talked about and that Mickey and I and Bobby Scarborough participated in down in Florida. For me, it was therapeutic because I got to talk about, the incident, the attack, and how it played out, the aftermath, and all of the trauma associated with it. Every time we do a podcast or I do an interview, I think it's helpful. It tries to, help me recover.
Well said, Larry. God bless you for that. You're a dear friend, Captain Morgan. I'll tell you that. And you're a true hero. You were president of the association, and I really appreciate you doing that. You did a lot of good for us. The crew appreciates that. I know I do for sure. So we could do this again sometime, Larry, because we got a lot more to talk about. But God bless you, brother, and my best to your family. And we'll be talking soon.
Okay. God bless you, Phil, and keep up the good work. This podcast is, just what the doctor ordered.
Thank you, sir. Talk again. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye now.